What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and this week we've been pretty much doing my 2022 ranking summit where I sit down and go over my early 2022 rankings, my early thoughts on the running backs, wide receivers. We did my top 24 running backs earlier this week, then my top 12 wide receivers because 24 was just too much. And now we're going to go over my 13th through 24th ranked wide receivers for PPR leagues today. Let's not waste any time. These have been taking a long time to do, but they are fun to just kind of give an early look at these wide receivers and sort of how I feel about the position in 2022. So if you didn't check out part one, don't hold me to it, but maybe I'll put like one of those cards up in the top where it comes up and it's like, oh, if you haven't seen it here, you can click there. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
Oh, okay, my bad. We're going to go into wide receiver 13. We'll pull up the tier list. As I promised, just how it was yesterday. Also, I don't like how it kind of came out as like this like 3x4 type picture here. I didn't mean for every tier to have strictly 3 wide receivers, just how it sort of happened. But at wide receiver 13, you guys are going to love this. I'm giving Michael Pittman the love that he deserves here. I think last year I made a big mistake in... Now, I think you guys are going to think I'm like saying I made a big mistake in fading Pittman, which obviously I did, but I made a big mistake in chasing year 2 breakouts. And it's not that year 2 breakouts are bad to chase at all, right? I chased Ayuk, didn't work out. I chased T. Higgins, that worked out. I chased Chase Claypool, didn't work out. And I was really overlooking the year 3 breakout. I was chasing all these year 2 guys. I wasn't really putting a lot of stock into year 3. And I was somebody pounding the table last year that year 2 breakouts are the highest breakout rate. A lot of the biggest, breakouts in fantasy come from year 2 guys. And that's true. This is a chart from RotoViz where if you look year 2, you go up. That is the highest breakout rate. It's about 10%. Breakout rate, I believe, is the first season that a wide receiver hits 200 PPR points. But if you go past that, year 3 is the second highest breakout rate by a lot, right? You go up there and it's like probably about 75% or not 7.5%, 8%, 8.5%, where year 1 is more towards like 5%, year 4 is more towards like 44%. So year 3 really isn't too far off year 2. So I think we really need to be targeting year 2 and year 3 wide receivers because we've seen the year 2 guys. Last year, we saw the year 3 guys really pop. We had Debo, Deontay, Hollywood. We had, before that, we had Calvin Ridley. Before that, we had Chris Godwin. So there are these massive breakouts to be had from year 3 guys. And I think that Michael Pittman is easily one of the best bets at that kind of upside. He is somebody that crushed Reception Perception, which is a website, tool, whatever you want to call it, by Matt Harmon. I would call him a wide receiver whisperer. He actually followed me last night on Twitter. Shout out to the boy. And he charted Michael Pittman, and Michael Pittman dominated last year. He had a 79th percentile win rate against man, 88th percentile against zone, 96th percentile against press, which is just dominant. That is up there with like A.J. Brown and Devontae Adams type numbers against press. That's better than Jamar Chase had against press last year. So really, really strong stuff. And you rarely see a setup like this where I'm going to show you guys some reception perceptions in a little bit. A lot of guys are either good at one or the other. Like Debo is elite against zone, against man and press, not so much. If you look at a guy like AJ Brown, elite against man and press, against zone, not so much. Michael Pittman is one of those guys across the board who dominates against every coverage. And you have the same thing with a guy like Deontay Johnson, who we know is a really clean route runner. He is the same way. So that's really promising. Harmon says that, this is a direct quote from what Harmon said. He said, Michael Pittman is some blend of Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson. So that's a profile I want to bet on. He had a 25.7% target share last year. He gets open. He draws targets. He had 88 catches, 1,082 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think that touchdown could easily come up. I think that could easily spike to like 12 to 14 touchdowns at his ceiling. He has Matt Ryan, who I don't think is this massive upgrade from Carson Wentz, but I think from just like a pocket passer that can get the ball into his number one's hands, a little bit cleaner there. It's not a massive upgrade, but I do think in year 3 he has the potential to take that next step. And you guys will see in these rankings, I'm targeting these younger profiles because I think it's a mistake, right? Last year when we were chasing Allen Robinson, Robert Woods, I'm trying to think all those other sort of like safe like wide receiver 2 type targets. Like I guess like Julio Jones is in that range as well. I think we really want to be siding on the side of year 2, year 3 type younger players that are on the upward trajectory, because at the very least those guys have pretty high floors where they're not going to bust entirely, and then they do have pretty crazy upside. Now, let's move on to wide receiver 14, who is, again, another young wide receiver. This one, a year 2 breakout candidate, Jalen Waddle. And Jalen Waddle is wide receiver 14, so that's really high, but he's someone that's a really tough ranking for me. I could see me moving him down. It's just tough, man. I really do. I wish that Waddle and Tyreek Hill just had a better quarterback. I don't love Tua. His big-time throw rate to turnover-worthy play rate was literally worse than Zach Wilson last year. He hasn't shown anything to this point that he can be a great quarterback that can support multiple wide receivers finishing in the top 24. And that's my main concern, is I think Tua holds this offense back. How much is Tyreek Hill going to take off the table? It's a little bit concerning. We're actually going to talk a lot of negative stuff about Waddle here because, like, even though I have him at wide receiver 14, there's a lot of concerns. I want to be really bought in on Waddle, and I think I already have him ranked pretty highly, but I do just kind of battle myself on Waddle. If you look at last year, he commanded volume, so I should want to be in, right? Almost a 25% target share as a rookie. Insane. The issue is 6.3 average depth of target is really short, man. That's like Jarvis Landry type junk volume. 100 catches, only wide receiver 15. So it's like, what? How many receptions does he need this year to finish as like a top 5 wide receiver? Would he need like 125 to get in that range? I mean, he only had 7 touchdowns. Maybe that bounces back, but you need more. 42nd in yards per out run as well. Like, not super efficient. A lot of it's just kind of junk line of scrimmage volume, like Jarvis Landry had a while back, which was fine for like some wide receiver 2 type finishes. But the reason I'm betting on Waddle at wide receiver 14 is he's going into year 2. He showed he can command targets, and I don't believe that he's just a in and around the line of scrimmage guy like a Jarvis Landry. He has a lot more juice than a Jarvis, where Jarvis, he didn't test well at the combine. He's more of this like very like coming out, at least. I think now not so much, but he was this like almost physical, like mini Anquan Bolden type guy, if that makes sense, where he was like this very physical guy who didn't light up the combine or anything. Waddle didn't test at the combine, but in terms of eye test, super explosive guy at Alabama, somebody who would have ran like in the 4.3s, really explosive athlete, had kind of, I wouldn't call it horrific, but he had a pretty bad injury in college, so he was like 1 year removed from that. So I think that he has the potential to expand his role, and that's why I'm willing to buy in at this price, is that there's at least, going into year 2, we can project that there is this ceiling there. Now, if he doesn't realize that ceiling this season, then I think that there's going to be a lot of reason for pessimism past that, but Jalen Waddle is a profile I want to be betting on. Again, I would be a lot more enthusiastic if it wasn't for Tua being his quarterback and having to compete with Tyreek Hill for targets. Next, though, we're going to talk wide receiver 15. Somebody I actually think I almost want to put ahead of Waddle, almost want to put ahead of Pittman, is Hollywood Brown. I am very, very excited about Hollywood Brown. He is someone who just came off of a year 3 breakout. He ended the season as a wide receiver 21 in points per game, and that doesn't look good. But I think that does. I don't know why I can't talk. By the way, it's the morning. I'm recording this at like 10 a.m. So it's a little bit of a different vibe here, where we're kind of waking up, drinking the orange juice. Maybe I'll even post this at like 10 a.m. just so you guys get that kind of vibe in your ear. But with Hollywood Brown, again, wide receiver 21 in points per game, it doesn't do him justice, because if you had Hollywood Brown on any of your teams, which I had him on a couple, he was really, really good for this stretch in time when Lamar Jackson wasn't out with like COVID and like weird injuries. Lamar Jackson only played 11 games with Hollywood Brown last year. The thing is that in those 11 games, when Marquise Brown wasn't catching passes from Tyler Huntley, he was really good. He averaged 17.09 points per game in those 11 games with Lamar Jackson, which would have finished as the wide receiver 9 in points per game on the year. Lamar gets hurt. He ends up as the wide receiver 21 on 14.1 points per game. In games without Lamar, he has 9.06 points per game. So I don't think you can really hold him to wide receiver 21. Again, with Lamar Jackson in the lineup, Marquise Brown was a top 12 wide receiver. And it's not like Marquise Brown. Like, I think a lot of people view him as like this Will Fuller field stretcher, deep threat guy. He is a legit target magnet. He is kind of a Calvin Ridley type guy. He had a target share of 26.7% last year. The year before that, he was at 26.3%, both top 12 numbers at the position. And he now goes to the Cardinals, which is a really sweet spot where Kyler is a better thrower than Lamar. He'll run less than Lamar. There's going to be more plays ran. There's going to be more pass attempts in this offense. And he's going to have less competition. There's not going to be a Mark Andrews on this offense. DeAndre Hopkins is suspended for the PEDs early on, and I'm still not even sure if DeAndre Hopkins has that much juice left. He kind of does feel like Julio Jones 1 year ago. So I'm very excited about Marquise Brown. This is an upgrade in situation. You can make the case that this is an upgrade in quarterback. I'm psyched. So anything inside of like that top 12 to 15, I think Marquise Brown belongs right in that area. Now, somebody else who had very similar numbers to Marquise Brown last year, where he was this sort of like target magnet, top 12 type guy, was Diontae Johnson, who I'm going to put at wide receiver 16. And he finished as the wide receiver 8 in points per game last year, so you got him a pretty good discount at wide receiver 16. His prices are around here. And the thing about Diontae Johnson that's amazing is he is a true, like I would almost call him like a wide receiver's wide receiver. He is a volume hog. He was second in the NFL in expected points per game, fourth in the NFL in target share. Now, expected points per game, I want to keep explaining it when I bring it up, so I'm not just like going way over people's heads. Expected points per game is just based on your targets, your red zone targets, all of the volume you've ever gotten. How many points per game should you be expected to put up just based off of your volume? And he was second in that last year. So literally second in expected points per game in terms of expected volume, fourth in the NFL in target share, fourth in the NFL in targets per out run. Just an absolute technician when it comes to earning targets, and it showed up in reception perception. He looked fantastic. Now, is this the one? Nope. That's not it either. Hold on. Yeah, I'm an idiot, but there it is. So we're going to talk about Diontae Johnson, who dominated reception perception in year 3, top 10 all-time zone success rate, 98th percentile against zone. And like I said, this is kind of like Michael Pittman's, where it's even better than Pittman's, where he had a 91st percentile against man, whereas Pittman had like a 70-something percentile against man. Really good against press. Diontae, not the same, but he's not that same physical X-type wide receiver. 98th percentile against zone is just absolutely insane. And this is what Matt Harmon said about him. He said the Steelers once drafted a elite separator in Antonio Brown on day 3 of the draft. Johnson wasn't drafted as late, and he's not quite at the Hall of Fame level Brown held in his prime, but he's getting close to posting similar reception perception results. That's how good of a route runner Johnson is, and it should be discussed more often. He's making Antonio Brown comparisons. This is a guy who actually watches the film. So this is a guy in Diontae Johnson who earns targets. He gets open at a high rate. That's what I'm looking for. We're getting a huge discount now after a top 12 season because he gets a quarterback like downgrade in the eyes of the market. I think it's a lateral step. I think Big Ben at the end of his career was garbage last year. Trubisky, Pickett, whoever ends up playing more games, I really don't know. I think both can maybe play. I think Pittman can kind of surprise some people. Like if I don't know why I said Pittman, but if Pickett's like this year's Mac Jones, it wouldn't really shock me a ton. And Trubisky, I think, can play a little bit. He showed some things at Buffalo. I don't know if he played in like a Week 18 game or like preseason, but he looked like he could play a little bit. It's also worth noting, this is the biggest issue. It's not so much a quarterback downgrade, so it's not going to be efficiency downgrade. It's going to be a volume downgrade, where with Big Ben, they love to pass the ball. They were 4th in pass attempts last season. And I think with Big Ben gone, I think they're going to be incentivized to sort of lean on the run game there, and they could go from having a top 5 pass attempts per game season to somewhere around like 20th to 25th, which would really hurt Diontae and probably put him closer to the wide receiver 15 range than the wide receiver 8 range, which is why I have him where he is. But if they pass at a fine rate, then I think that he is a fine bet to make. Now, the next guy we'll talk about is in the start of E tier, and this is a weird range of wide receivers here. I'm not super set on how this order is at this point yet, but let's put DJ Moore here at wide receiver 17. And this is similar profile to Marquise Brown, Diontae Johnson. It's one of these guys who gets open and demands targets. He is a target hog. He was 5th in target share last year, tied for 5th in targets per out run, next to Justin Jefferson, behind only Diontae Johnson, Kupp, Devontae Adams. He had another year of bad quarterback play. He had another year of only 4 touchdowns. So at this point, it's like he got 14 points per game as the wide receiver 23. How many more years are we going to buy into his talent and then get let down by bad touchdown luck and bad quarterback play? It becomes tough, man, because at some point it has to bounce back. He is somebody that has shown that he can be efficient. There's been seasons where he's had high yards per target or high yards per out run, so he can create his own efficiency despite quarterback play. And you have to believe that touchdowns aren't super tied to the player, right? We've seen Julio Jones have like 6 touchdown seasons where he's like this big hulking wide receiver that's amazing in the red zone. So you want to say that things can kind of scale back for DJ Moore. If he sees any kind of efficiency and he sees like 8 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns, then he pays off. It's tough to bet on that, though. I think the more I think the more realistic outcome is that they trade for Baker Mayfield or they trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, who aren't amazing, but Jimmy Garoppolo supported Deebo Samuel. He supported Ayuk the year before that. Jimmy Garoppolo can support fantasy wide receivers. Baker hasn't shown that yet, but he hasn't had like the best weapons in Cleveland. He had like weird years with Odell Beckham. I'm still a firm believer that Odell is a good quarterback. He was also in these systems that didn't pass the ball at all, so he never really got the chance to like support anything outside of like a Jarvis Landry like wide receiver 2 season. But it's tough to say this far out. I think the minute that a quarterback gets signed there or gets traded there, he probably flies up. I mean, if his ADP is around like wide receiver 17, wide receiver 18, wide receiver 19, he probably ends up in like the top 15 type conversation if that happens. Then we'll talk like these guys are genuine headaches, man. Like this is not an easy area to rank because I'll have Mike Williams at wide receiver 18, but I hate it. I genuinely hate it. I just have to talk myself into it because of how high scoring the offense is going to be with Justin Herbert, and I'm a big believer in Justin Herbert. All they have is Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, and Mike Williams. There's nothing else going on there. It's a very concentrated pie of targets. But it just gets tough, man. It gets tough. And it seems like they like him. They gave him a 3-year extension. They used him as like this lower ADOT. Like he's always been a deep threat guy, like ADOT, like 15, 13, 14. He had like a 9-yard to 10-yard ADOT through 3 weeks. Was amazing early on. I just don't know how to explain these splits. Like I genuinely like I don't know what to make of this, man. He ended up as a wide receiver 13 in points per game last year, which looks good when you zoom out, but when you just those first 5 weeks were amazing. I had him on a team. I had him in my home league. It was sick, man. He had 23 points per game through 5 weeks. He was being used as this true alpha X wide receiver. And then it all just fell apart. And he didn't miss any games because of injury. He's always been banged up. But it's hard to be like, oh, Mike Williams was banged up, so you can't really count those games. Mike Williams every year is banged up. So it's tough to say that, like, you can't expect a full 17-game season of full health from Mike Williams. He's going to get banged up by week 7. That's what happens with Mike Williams. So it's weird. They used him in this true X wide receiver role through those first 5 weeks, and then they sort of reverted back to his deep role, which sort of sucks, where it's just like this boom bust. And I guess if you're paying like a wide receiver 30 price for it, it's not bad because you can kind of just get like huge spike weeks in your flex. But when you're paying, like, he goes wide receiver 13 on Underdog. I think it's because it's best ball. Mike Williams kind of appeals to that a little bit more. But his ADP elsewhere is like wide receiver 15, wide receiver 17, 18, something like that. It's tough, dude. I'm just not sure. Like, I almost want to put him lower. Like, I have 2 guys we're going to rank here in a second that I want to put ahead of Mike Williams. I don't know. It really just comes down to how much you... And we'll talk about the next 2 wide receivers, but it really comes down to talent versus situation. And Mike Williams really borders on that as a guy that I don't think is a amazing wide receiver. But when you're catching passes from Justin Herbert, who has a 50-touchdown MVP campaign in him, and I would say that's imminent. I would say that's in the next 3 years for Justin Herbert, where we see like a 40-plus touchdown MVP-type campaign. If that's this year, Mike Williams benefits from that. And that's kind of as simple as it is. You could also say Keenan Allen's getting old. He could take a step back. So there's a couple avenues for Mike Williams, but... like these splits, I'm staring at him, and it's like it's genuinely like mind-boggling. He was a like 10.8 target per game guy, then went down to 7.55. I guess a touchdown luck reverted back a little bit, where he went from like a 20 touchdown pace to a 5 touchdown pace. So maybe that comes up a little bit, but like 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown every 4 games isn't gonna cut it. I think it probably ends up somewhere in between there, but it's tough, man. Like he is easily in this wide receiver like E tier. Like I think of the wide receivers listed so far, he is the worst one from a talent perspective, and it's not very close. But yeah, that's my issue with Mike Williams is you're buying into situation over talent, which is a really risky game. So for me, it's kind of just juggling at what point does he become the pick. Now, next up, we'll talk about a guy who's pretty much in the opposite situation. These next 2 guys, we'll have Terry McLaurin here, where he is amazing. This is his reception perception from last year, which was insane. 94th percentile against man, 94th percentile against press. Terry McLaurin just does that. He just does that. That's routine for him. He is a very strong route runner. His contested catch ability is amazing. He's been catching passes from Taylor Heineke, Case Keenum for a little bit, Dwayne Haskins. Like, it's just been so rough for the guy, for somebody that is a very, very talented wide receiver. And I think that he's going to have Carson Wentz this year, and I think that's going to be his best quarterback he's ever played with in his entire career, which is exciting for him. I think there's no questioning McLaurin's ability. Carson Wentz showed last year that he could support Michael Pittman to, like, I think Michael Pittman didn't finish as a top 24 guy, but he was younger in his career. Carson Wentz has supported guys like Alshon Jeffrey before. There's something to be excited about. Carson Wentz can at least sustain an offense, throw for 25 or more touchdowns, 3,500 yards, and give you an actual offense to play with. So I think that Wentz becomes interesting for that. And I think at the end of the day, it's better for McLaurin. McLaurin is going, I don't know why I said McLaurin. McLaurin is going to have the best quarterback play of his entire career. And people also forget how bad this offense was. They were running out. I'm trying to think. They had those no-name guys. Like Cam Sims was out there making plays for them. Cam Sims was making plays for them. They had Cam Sims. They had like another like gadgety type guy. Oh man, it's gonna kill me. It might have been like a Foster or a man. It was like a rookie they had who was like I gotta pause and look it up. Yeah, I was thinking of Steven Sims, who hadn't played there since the year prior. But they just had, like, they had 50 targets go to Ricky Seals-Jones, 60 targets go to Adam Humphries. Like, just a absolutely just awful offense. So I think Curtis Samuel will be healthy this year. You have Terry McLaurin. You have a better quarterback in Wentz. You have Logan Thomas potentially being healthy. You have Jahan Dotson coming in, first-round rookie. There are some things to be excited about with Terry McLaurin. He is somebody where, if we're betting on talent, McLaurin has that very easily. And you can say the same, it's pretty much the same exact argument for DK Metcalf, where it becomes like, at what point do we just take the good wide receivers and bet on the talent and just hope that they create their own efficiency, and also kind of accept that we're not amazing at projecting offenses. Sometimes, you know, teams sort of come out of nowhere and play decent on offense. So Metcalf is interesting because he was amazing last year, and it really, really, really sucks that he doesn't still have Russell Wilson, because I would be all over him right now. He just put up insane numbers last year, just like really promising stuff. Now, we're getting an offense without Russell Wilson, but in terms of just individual performance for Metcalf, it was insane last year. He had a great reception perception, 73rd percentile against man, 92nd percentile against press, and Matt Harmon said, anyone out there who still tells you DK Metcalf, I don't know why I can't talk. He said, anyone out there who still tells you that DK Metcalf can't run routes or doesn't get open is lying to you. Metcalf still runs slants and nines at a high rate, 44.7% of sample routes, but the longer he's played, the more balanced his route tree has become. So he's developing into this dominant, do-it-all X wide receiver. He's developing as a wide receiver. His reception perception looks great. He's bullying press, which what you want him to do as a 6'4", 230-pound, rocked-up 4-3-1 type wide receiver. He's beating man. He's running better routes at this point. We're going into year 4 where everything's coming together, because he not only did that, but he commanded a 27.3% target share. A 27.3% target share, 8th in the NFL. That's big boy type numbers, especially next to a guy like Lockett. And he did that not where you have Waddle, who had a 25% target share on like a 6-yard ADOT. You had Kupp, who had like a 30% target share on like an 8.4-yard ADOT. Metcalf had a 27.3% target share on an average depth of target of 13 yards. He got Geno Smith to trust him enough to give him the ball on a quarter of his throws when he's past the first down marker. No backup quarterback wants to throw the ball that deep, that consistently, but he was getting open that consistently, that he was getting that kind of target share. So it sucks, dude. It sucks that his situation is bad, because, again, gets open, runs great routes, commanded a really fat target share. And we have a situation crumbling around him where he was catching passes from the best deep ball thrower in the NFL. It's going to be a run-first offense. It's going to be Drew Lock, who, if you want to cling on to anything, Drew Lock is, I would say, his calling card. Here's the thing. If we're looking at like his attributes, it's not like his deep throw accuracy and his throw power isn't like 99, but I think those are his best attributes, is throwing the deep ball and making plays off of that. I would put him like in like the 70s, and the rest of his stats like in the 60s or whatever, but you get what I'm saying. It's a rough situation, though. You kind of have to weigh it to the point where it's like, man, at what point do we just take good players in the NFL? And it's something that I have to wrestle with in these rankings, and that we all just kind of have to wrestle with, because the Mike Williams versus Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf dichotomy, I would even put DJ Moore in that range of talented wide receiver in bad situation. Now we'll talk about Jerry Jeudy, who I would say like is a talented wide receiver or I would say unproven wide receiver in a good situation, so that becomes a little bit more interesting. But we'll talk about these guys together. We have Jeudy and Sutton. I have them back-to-back, 21-22, and I'm really excited about Russell Wilson on this offense. First and foremost, when we look at what Russell Wilson has done, absolutely insane. On like league-low type passing volume, we are talking about consistently, if you take away 2021, 3 out of 4 of those years, 3,500 plus passing yards. All 4 of those years, 30 plus TDs. On those types of attempt numbers are just wild. Like his efficiency is insane. What he's done is insane. You have Nathaniel Hackett coming in as OC, which is really interesting because Russell Wilson all of his life has been a low attempt guy. Pete Carroll won't pass the ball. They run a slow pace. And Nathaniel Hackett comes from Green Bay, who have run a pretty slow-paced offense, which is something to be worried about. But in terms of neutral pass rate since 2019, which is when Nathaniel Hackett got hired as offense coordinator. So during his 3 years as OC, they were 7th in neutral pass rate, which is really, really good, which means on not like third and longs or garbage time, just in neutral situations, how often is he passing the ball? He is somebody that skews pass. So that's going to be really, really good for Jeudy and Sutton. Now, why I have Jeudy over Sutton, and I don't think it's all that close, is because Judy's going into year 3. I love those year 3 breakouts. He had a 21% target share as a rookie, which is better than CeeDee Lamb's career high target share. So Jeudy Lamb commands targets. He is a very smooth operator in terms of route run. I believe in his first year, his reception perception was really clean. And even with an ankle injury last year, he had a high ankle sprain, which is a really tough injury to come back from. He comes back and he completely neutralized Sutton when he was on the field. Like, this is like, if you're a Sutton believer, I don't know how you explain these stats. And I've heard a lot of he operates as a deep threat, and he was more of a do-it-all role. Jeudy comes in, and then Sutton gets banished to the deep threat role. Bridgewater didn't want to throw it to him that deep. I got to be honest with you guys, I can't buy that a ton. I don't know how you go from 9 targets a game to 4.6 because Jeudy comes in, and how that doesn't transfer over to the next year. Jeudy had more points per game. Jeudy had a better yards per out run, a better target per out run than him last year. And that was in year 2, coming off of a high ankle sprain. So I just don't see it. Sutton is somebody that I'm not super interested in. I have him here because he has Russell Wilson throwing him passes, but it is what it is. You also could look at his reception perception numbers. He had 26% target share in that second year, which was really great, but his reception perception numbers were sort of lacking that year. And for a guy that is his calling card at this point is just commanding a fat target share, he's only done it once, only done it in year 2. Reception perception that year wasn't super clean. He wasn't efficient that year. He didn't even finish in the top 24 wide receivers. I didn't love him coming out of school. There's just a ton of reasons why I am team Jeudy over Sutton, and Sutton's actually on the border of getting moved to F tier, and maybe even outside of the top 24 wide receivers, but I'll put him here for now just because of the offense that he's in, and I guess I can cling on to his second year a little bit. Now, I think you guys are going to hate this tier. I got to be honest with you guys. I think you guys are going to not be happy about this tier. I'll be honest. Brandon Cooks and Allen Robinson were heavily in consideration here, but I want to be chasing the younger upside guys. I don't want to get caught in veterans who are stable floors and just projections and guys that could fall off a cliff. I'll talk about them in later videos, so I don't want to give too much time on them, but I have a hard time understanding why Brandon Cooks and why I should pay up for Brandon Cooks and Allen Robinson when I can just wait and draft Michael Thomas, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett. I think all of those guys project very similarly. So I don't know why I would prioritize any of them. Outside of Allen Robinson, who out of all of them is in the best offense, but again, he's in the same offense as Cooper Kupp, and I'm not sure how much food is really on that table for him to take away from Cooper Kupp. I know that Odell Beckham wasn't bad last year, same thing with Robert Woods, but I think he's at best just sort of a back-end fringy wide receiver 2. I'd probably prefer him more in that fringe wide receiver 30 range. So at wide receiver 23, we're going to have Elijah Moore. And I just don't get the pessimism at all on Elijah Moore. This is a guy who should be going at the 4-5 turn of drafts. He goes at the 6-7. He is the same profile as last year's guys in terms of Ayuk, Claypool, T. Higgins. I think we're overcorrecting on the Elijah Moore thing. Last year, he had 12.6 points per game last year. He was the wide receiver 28. So I don't think, being the wide receiver 28 in points per game as a rookie, I don't think it's wild to have him as the wide receiver 23 in 2022. I just don't think that that's that wild. And he had an 18.6% target share, which isn't that great, but as we know, rookies improve on their target share and on their points per game. As you guys can see, points per game, it increased from 6.7 points per game to 8.9. But I took the top 100 rookie wide receivers, a couple years of data, charted how much from year 1 to year 2 that their points per game and target share change. I wasn't expecting a huge increase like this, but target share and points per game increases a ton. And if you look at other positions, or not other positions, but just the veterans of the position, they are expected to have their points per game go down. So that's Allen Robinson and Brandon Cooks right there. Their target share, their points per game is expected to drop off year over year. But when you look at a guy like Elijah Moore in year 2, he's expected to really take this next step. And I think it's worth noting that the Jets were kind of idiots last year, and they wouldn't let Elijah Moore play. Like, they were playing Keelan Cole over him a little bit, Denzel Mims, like Braxton Berrios. If you look at his game log, through 8 weeks, he had an 85% target, or 85% snap share, 79% snap share, but then it was like 52, 39, 69, 35. He didn't have like a starting wide receiver role until week 9, when he just went crazy. 27 points, 13, 29.6, 9, 20.6. Before his injury, he was a guy that we were putting, like, I remember if you go back to my like week 12 or week 13 top 24 wide receiver rankings video, we were all putting Elijah Moore in our top 24. So I don't see why heading into next season we don't do that, because we're now heading into a spot where the team believes in Elijah Moore. I believe that he won't be playing on 75% of the snaps. He's probably going to be playing in 90% plus, which means that he'll be locking in a crazy target share. On a per route basis last year, he had an 18.6% target share, but again, you have to remember, he wasn't playing on all the routes. If you look at a per route basis, he led all rookie wide receivers. You want to talk about Waddle, you want to talk about Chase, you want to talk about any of those guys from last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He led all of them in targets per out run. He had a 26% targets per out run, tied for 13th next to Keenan Allen among all wide receivers with over like 250 routes run. That's elite company as a rookie in a bad situation, on a limited amount of the routes. Like, it's just crazy. And I mean, his reception perception, super clean as a rookie, 81st percentile, 76th, 70th. Like, that seems like a guy who's on a trajectory to almost look like a Deontay Johnson, where he can win against all 3 phases of the game. This Jets offense is going to be better as well. I think everyone's just sort of pawning off the Jets offense to be this dumpster fire. Their offensive line is going to be sick. PFF has them as a top 15 offensive line. You have Becton, you have Elijah Vera Tucker, you have George Fant, you have Laken Tomlinson. Then you have Zach Wilson, who can take this year 2 jump. And we don't need him to be MVP Josh Allen, but for him to be like year 2 Jared Goff, that's in the range. He has Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios. Like, this is the most firepower-led Jets offense we've had. There's going to be some efficiency. You even have tight ends now, Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzoma. Like, it's going to be a decent offense. You have LaFleur running it. You have Breece Hall in the run game. It's going to be a solid offense. And if any of you guys out there think that he's not going to get the routes because he's a solely slot wide receiver, over 3/4 of his routes last year were as a true X wide receiver at 5'8", 176 pounds, or 186 pounds, whatever he is. I just don't get it. I don't get why he's not a unanimous top 24 guy. Like, if it wasn't for ADP, I'd almost want to have him in this range. We need to be betting on Elijah Moore going into year 2. And if you want to fade him because of his uniform, go ahead, but I think it's a bad bet to make. Now, the last guy we'll talk about is, I think, another one you guys aren't going to love. But I want to be prioritizing these profiles over the veteran wide receivers. And wide receiver 24, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, I admit, in the F tier, I would have like Brandon Cooks here, Allen Robinson here, like Gabe Davis, Rashad Bateman in this range, maybe Mooney in this range. But that's about what I would have F tier at. But I want to be prioritizing within that tier the 2 profiles with the highest upside in my eyes. Now, people believe that Amon-Ra St. Brown is just benefited from an empty wide receiver room. Here's the thing, guys. I get that Hawkinson was hurt. I get that Swift was hurt during Amon-Ra St. Brown's stretch. But he had from weeks 13 to weeks 18, where DeAndre Swift played in 2 of those games. I believe Hawk maybe played in a couple. Weeks 13 to 18, he was a 25-point-per-game wide receiver. I don't know how you have a rookie wide receiver on the Detroit Lions putting up 25 points per game over a 6-game stretch and just throw that out and just disregard that. And I think this is the biggest misconception, is a lot of people who are on the fade Amon-Ra St. Brown hype train are saying pretty much he's not going to do what he did last year. And at wide receiver 24, we're not betting on him to be 25-point-per-game guy. If he's a 25-point-per-game guy, Amon-Ra St. Brown's an S tier. I'm not betting on him to repeat at 25 points per game, but he flashed that he's a very good wide receiver. He had a 21.4% target share. On a per route basis, he was at 24.7%. So there's room to grow there if he plays more of the routes. I just don't get it. I don't get why we're discounting it so much. I get that there wasn't a ton in that wide receiver room that he was competing with, but he balled out. And we've seen wide receivers in empty wide receiver rooms not do anything. We saw Jalen Reagor do that in his rookie year. We saw N'Keal Harry do that in his rookie year. We've seen Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs do that in their rookie years. Not every guy in an empty wide receiver room is going to produce. So I think holding this against Amon-Ra St. Brown makes no sense. He balled out. Also, rookies tend to backload their points anyways. If you look at Waddle, he blew up down the stretch. Same thing with Elijah Moore. He blew up down the stretch. If you want to look the year before that, Ayuk blew up down the stretch. You had before that, you had Deebo Samuel and AJ Brown blow up down the stretch. I talk about this all the time. Wide receivers that are rookies, they backload their points because they're not getting a full route participation until like week 5, week 6. On top of that, he looked amazing on film. He had an 80 PFF grade, which I'm telling you, that's nothing to sneeze at. An 80 PFF grade is nothing to sneeze at. Wide receivers drafted round 3 or later with an 80 or better PFF receiving grade. You have Antonio Brown. This is a great tweet from Jacob Sanderson. Antonio Brown, Doug Baldwin, Keenan Allen, Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That is the company that he is in. And he's now going to be a full-time wide receiver on an ascending offense where their offensive line is going to be like a top 3 unit in the NFL. You got Ragnar, you got Sewell, you got Goff, who is a capable quarterback that has shown that he can support top 12 wide receivers. You have Hawkinson, you have Swift. Like, it's going to be a more efficient offense. It's going to be a better offense. I think this Lions team is very sneaky for fantasy. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be the guy that I'm betting on. If you want to bet on Allen Robinson and Brandon Cooks and take the stable asset and just bank your back-end wide receiver 2 points, you can be my guest, and that's completely fine. But this is the route that I'll be going. So with that being said, didn't mean to get all fired up there, but I know a lot of you guys are going to hate that I didn't have Allen Robinson there or like Brandon Cooks or Bateman or any of that. I truly do prefer Elijah Moore and Amon-Ra St. Brown to all of those guys. I'll be having them in a lot of leagues because they are going around like wide receiver 30 type prices. I think that's too cheap. We'll see if things adjust by August. But with all that being said, those are my official top 24 rankings. Again, I'm very firm on the tiers. If you want to have Sutton at the top of E tier, go ahead, be my guest. I won't really argue it a ton. But this is the official top 24. I feel good about the tiers right now. I think this is going to be completely flipped on its head by the time we get to August, but this is my early feelings on the wide receiver ranking. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from misdemeanor.